Welcome, everyone. I'll call to order the Lost Pines Groundwater Conservation District Board Meeting, Wednesday, June 19th. It is now 6:01 p.m. I'll be informed. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Welcome. And this is our first Zoom meeting in a long while. First one here in this new office. So welcome to the folks online. And if anyone online has any public comments, please let us know. And we'll get you in the queue. With that, if you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and the Texas flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation. Flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, one state under God, one indivisible. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to agenda item number 2, public comments. I've got one person signed up. And if anyone online, again, please let us know. First up is Alan.
Thank you. I just wanted to take a brief moment and introduce myself. I was not at your last meeting, but I was at the April meeting, and a comment came up, and I'll address that. I work for SLR Properties, so I'm the Vice President of Operations for SLR Properties. So I know there were some comments in the April meeting about concerns with the announcements that we have for building a power plant and what that might mean for the groundwater. So what I can tell you is that power plant, it has been announced that we're planning to put that power plant in Lee County, but it is planned to be an air-cooled unit. So there's not, because of the value of the groundwater and because of any concerns, so we're not going to be pumping groundwater to cool that unit. Now, there may be some wells or some groundwater needed either for Manville or some wells for just the employees and things like that, residual water, but it will not be the significant amount of water needed for a combined cycle gas plant. It will not be, it's not going to be a water cooled unit. So I wanted to address that just so that I know there's been some articles and rumors and concerns out there, but I wanted the board to have that. And I also will be glad to give my phone number. So if anybody here up in that area has questions or concerns, feel free to contact me. So you can catch me at a break, or I can just my phone number right now. It's 512-810-3584. And again, I'll be glad to, if I can't answer the question, or I can maybe point you to the right individual within the SLR property.
What's your name again, sir?
My name is Alan.
Alan
Gardenhire. GARDENHIRE. So that's all I wanted to do. Thank you.
One question. Have y'all completed y'all's water line yet?
So, or if you're referring to the Edward project where they're
All the way from the properties all the way to Taylor, is that completed?
so the I can't speak to the transmission line that leaves our property and gets all the way to Taylor. I don't know if they've completed that yet. They have completed the collection lines up in our property area that's gathering the wells, the water, and taking it to that new plant there on 314. That collection line is completed, but the transmission line to Taylor, I can't speak to.
Okay, and one other quick question. When will y'all start doing any testing or pumping water?
There's been some initial testing just to verify that the collection line didn't have leaks and some of that. So I think the majority, Garney Construction is doing that. The majority of that testing, I think, is completed. But I would have to follow back up with Garner, Epcor, and Garney, who's their EPC, to verify. There may be some more, but majority of the collection line up in the area, I think kind of we're closer to that. I think most of that, Mr. Cook, has been tested.
Okay, well, I'm just curious about when we're going to start seeing some flow through the line. That's what I guess the question.
Mr. Cook, I suggest we speak to him after the meeting.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Thank you.
I got here.
All right. Any other public comments? from here in the office? No. How about online? Anyone online?
That's muted.
Okay. All right, then. If then we'll move on. If no more public comments, we'll move to the agenda item 3, the consent agenda.
President Hernandez, can
Yeah.
we possibly move back to 1B, the welcome and introductions? We do have our new employee here that actually has a standing commitment. She needs to leave early. So I wanted to go ahead and do that under welcome and introduction.
Okay, I was going to do it under announcements, but welcome and welcome.
Okay,
is fine.
announcements work great. We'll do it then.
All right. Okay, I've got a note here for myself under announcements, but thanks for reminding me. On the consent agenda, I do wish to pull out item 3C, the invoices, because we do have an invoice that came in late last week. It's on the dais. Everyone should have a copy. It's the half invoice for $5,500. So I would like to pull out 3C for right now. So the consent agenda will be items 3A, the minutes, and the 3B, the financial report. That would entertain
Give a motion to approve
except for 3C. All right, hearing a motion to accept items 3A and B. In a second, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, with that, item 3C, the reason I wanted to pull it out again is because we do have there was a linked incoming invoice. It just came in late last week from HAF. This is our database, our well database. And so that's for $5,500. And this is just normal web hosting of our database. I believe it's the annual fee. So with that, I'll put that back on the floor for item 3C and entertain a motion on 3C, the invoice received greater than 5,000.
I'll make a motion to approve the half invoice.
And the other invoices.
Oh, yes.
All the invoices. So we have a motion to accept all the invoices, including the half, and a second by Director Rogers. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. We are now on item 4A, regular agenda announcements. And I was just mentioned, we welcome to our new education and outreach coordinator, Claire Marks. Hello, Claire. She's been doing a great job so far. The district is now on social media. So if anyone has a Facebook account or Instagram, we're on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. I saw a flyer that was created and a newspaper announcement. So I think we're going to have.
Could she say a few words?
Yeah, please.
Could you come forward and say a few words, Claire? You don't have to give a full speech. Okay.
And I won't time you.
Howdy, y'all. Well, thank you for hiring me. I'm really excited for this opportunity and the future of outreach and education programs for the district. Students and children are the future, but also you can't have behavior change without education and people being aware of issues and problems. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be able to make residents of Bastrop and Lee County aware of water issues and hopefully conserve water for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Anyone else?
Oh, Elvis.
Oh, well, we haven't had a need for that yet. So,
I thought you were back.
well, no, I still have. I've got 3 out of the 4 that I could have contacted. So we'll hold off on that. That was regarding a negotiation committee, but we'll announce that in the future.
Okay.
All right, with moving on then, item 4B, discussion, consideration of, and possible action on the district's 2023 annual audit. This was on the agenda last month. Unfortunately, gentleman was out ill, so you're here this month. So welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. It's a pleasure to join you again. I apologize for last month. I came back from a trip with my wife. I experienced sinus infection, so I apologize for that. So I'll try to be brief. Everyone has a copy of the bound audit. In years past, I've used it to kind of reinforce or go through some of these points. I just have it.
Can we get your name?
Robert could tell you. So, aid in the discussion, but I largely just have it out loud now. I'd like to focus on three things, and if anything else came to our attention, we certainly try to discuss that. The three things are the opinion of what it means, how we got to our opinion, so were there any observations of the audit, so things like findings, recommendations, and then audit adjustments. And then the last thing that we take a look at is this idea of reserves in your ending equity. So I'll start with the opinion. The opinion is a letter. Very important to us as your auditor. It summarizes what we did, what we're responsible for as your auditor, what the district is responsible for relative to the audit. And then it makes a statement, and that statement is it's the auditor's opinion that the information in the report, the financial statements, footnotes, supplementary information is fairly stated, and all materials and presented in accordance with generally accepted technical terms for the type of opinion that you receive for the fiscal year ended December 31st, 2023 is unmodified. It doesn't do a good job necessarily explaining that it's a good or bad thing. It simply means that the letter hasn't been changed in any way, so there are no limitations or exceptions relative to it. So the common term that's used for this type of opinion does a better job of conveying that it's a good thing and that's clean. So you'll commonly hear you receive a clean opinion. It's what you want to receive, and it's what the district did in fact receive for the ended. Most auditees do receive clean opinion, but it's important to look at how we got to that. So that comes by way of a consideration or contemplation of were there observations of the audit? So were there findings? Eventually, we could have controller compliance findings. Because if you were in the audit, there were no findings. Make recommendations relative to procedures or accounting of an entity, and those would be considered management letter comments or auditor recommendations. So we did not have any for the year. The last thing, and this speaks directly to that presented in accounting principles, and that's audit adjustments. So items that we felt were necessary to get your financial statements to present in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, and we had 8. So in years past, I think we've had a handful, 5, and so there was a slight uptick year over year, and that relates to some of the recording relative to the purchase of this building. There was a lease, and so I think generally we've got 4 or 5, and they relate largely to some issues we've had with QuickBooks, recording audit adjustments properly or completely, taking off accruals, putting on accruals, and so that would be the only thing I would say that I would like to see the district slide back down or have 5 or fewer audit adjustments. So if we package those 3 things together, no findings, no recommendations, 8 adjustments, I would say the 8 adjustments, the only thing the district really needs to be concerned with, a little bit of homework relative to that, but I think that the district got to a clean opinion as well. I don't have any significant concerns. Those reserves, this conversation for us, for you, normally I talk about it in terms of months, you have years. And so what we normally do is take the last fiscal year, divide your expenses by 12, come up with an average monthly amount. It's not really necessary for you. You had 1.2 million, give or take, for the year under audit. You've got $4.3 million in ending equity. And so you've got an excess of 3 years. So the normalized conversation for me is, 3 to 6 months of reserves. You've got in excess of 3 years. So essentially, this district could function without receiving $1 of revenue for 3 years at current level. I'd like to thank the board for allowing us to serve as your independent auditor. I'd like to thank the district for holding. Hope we received an audit. Does anyone have any questions about anything that I discussed or anything else related to? Sure.
I have a question about the 8 adjustments. And so I think what I hear you saying is we could just sort of sharpen our classification of, on these lease items, it said lease liability. It's just little things
Correct.
that were misclassified.
Wasn't anything in those 8 that we're really concerned with, but in working toward, that fairly stated in accordance with GAAP. So the district has struggled with some aspects of QuickBooks as far as reporting receivables. And we've had to take them off and put them on, at different points in time, or recording accounts payable. The lease, the standard just changed. And so in years past, you would have potentially a capital or an operating lease, and they were treated differently. Now they're all the same. They're all debt. And so I think that relates more or less to the fact that now everything is debt, that it was recorded as such. And so it's something that's very new. And then the building, is not something that year in, year out got. And so being full accrual, it actually gets recorded to the balance sheet rather than being an income statement item. So.
What I noticed was it seemed like most of the discrepancies or the changes were based on year end. It was a timing. That's
Right.
what it looked like to me. Is that accurate?
Typically, what we've had to do is usually the first entry, I think, is described as in relation to proper reporting of prior year audit adjustments, and so little tweaks relative to those. And then, yes, taking things off in the prior year and then putting them on as necessary. I think there was a receivable related to fees that were recorded and received and not taken off, and so that would be revenue specific to last year rather than this year. So little tweaks relative to your financial statements.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you. Thank you, sir. Okay, moving to regular agenda item 4C. Presentation by LRE Water on the Lost Pine Groundwater Conservation District's 3-dimensional map. Good question. Did
Bobby here? Bobby's not-
Yeah, Bob, do we need to formally accept the audit and the auditor's report? Is that something that we need a motion and to vote on, Bobby?
Yes, you should.
Okay, so before we move on, let us go back then to item 4B with the audit. And
We approve the district's 2023 annual audit.
the motion to approve the District 2023 annual audit. We have a motion. Second. I have a second. I heard first Mr. Cook has a second. So with that, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you. I think it was Melissa, thank you for reminding us. Item 4C, the presentation by LRE Water on the district's 3-dimensional map. Mr. Vince Claus. And this was presented, I think initially when 2 months ago or so. And so we wanted to wait till we had the Zoom and the computers that we can record this. So that's why he's back here today to finish up.
I'd like to start off by once again thanking the board for this opportunity. My name is Vince Claus. This was a pure joy to work on for several different reasons. The major primary reason for me was being able to help the district here, and a lot of what we've done, we've now laid the foundation, the groundwork for what's to come in terms of future scientific initiatives, future opportunities that I believe that the district and board will appreciate as a result of this work already being completed. One thing that I stressed early on here is we wanted to be very methodical about how we went about doing this work so that we were not being redundant anywhere along the way. And so today's presentation is actually a little bit different than what I did present last month. I realized last month's presentation maybe didn't address a couple of key concerns and questions that arose from board members, specifically looking at what some of those deliverables that the board was actually receiving actually look like. We talk about this as a 3D hydrogeologic model, but what the districts actually received is far more than just the 3D model itself. I think that the next slide here provides a little bit more of hopefully an understanding of what we've really done here. So this was in our initial scope, which we said this model was going to aim to integrate, build upon, and ultimately enhance existing regional data sets of new hydrogeologic data. So very vague in terms of what that's actually telling us, but a way to kind of simplify that is the goal of developing this 3D hydrogeologic model was to provide the district with new tools for their groundwater management toolbox. So the management plan, the district's roles, these are all tools within that toolbox that the district uses as it goes about managing the groundwater resources of Lee and Bastrop County. What we've done with the 3D hydrogeologic model is we've actually added several new tools to that toolbox that the district could use moving forward and will benefit from. So I pointed out on this slide here that we have several key deliverables. The first is the 3D hydrogeologic model itself. It makes for very nice visuals, graphics, and it helps communicate complex geologic data in a way that's user-friendly and also a little bit more easier to understand than a bunch of 2D map representations. So through the development of the 3D hydrogeologic model, we've developed detailed stratigraphy. I know, once again, a little bit of technical jargon there, but what we've done is we've created detailed aquifer depth and aquifer thickness interpretation. So now we better understand exactly how thick our aquifers are across both counties here. And then we also understand the drilling depth to those aquifers across both counties in a way that's more detailed than what was previously in existence. And so in terms of working towards better science, better results, better data, that's what we've done here through the detailed stratigraphy work. We've also created a new virtual bore framework. So the district has a virtual bore tool on the website. It's a tool that allows you to click anywhere within Lost Pines GCD and receive that subsurface geologic information at a location. We've now updated that tool's framework, the background data that tool runs off of, to include this detailed stratigraphy information. So future well owners, current landowners, anyone has access to that tool currently on the district's website. Now we're providing those users better data as they go about using that tool. Another piece of this was aquifer designations. We went through the district's database and we assigned aquifers to every registered well within that database. That was something that previously did not exist before developing this model. To do that, we needed the detailed stratigraphy. We needed that detailed understanding of our aquifer depths to be able to do that. And I was at TWCA last week up in Arlington, and actually was complimented by Steve Young with Intera, who represents Post Oak, because he said he got our data, he looked at it, and it matches their data. And so he was pleasantly surprised that we came to similar results. And he said in one instance that your data may even be better, something along those lines, and just kind of joking, giving me a high five there. There's, if any of y'all know Steve, wonderful gentleman. And anyways, it was a great conversation that we had there. But specifically related to the aquifer designations is something that's being very valuable and informational for the district, but also for those of us who use this information to better understand pumpage from our various aquifers. Understanding where those wells are completed is a key piece of all that. And then we've organized water well data sets. So that's the state's water well databases. They have two of them. One's the Texas Water Development Board groundwater database. The other one is the submitted drillers reports TDLR database. So all the wells drilled since 2001 are in one database. The other one includes wells that the Texas Water Development Board maintains information on. So we've taken all that data, we've stripped out all the unnecessary information, we've captured the necessary information, such as well construction information, water chemistry data. And we've created new data sets that are tailored specifically to the Lost Pines GCD area. Also, we did the same thing for chemistry. And I believe I got it for you, Jim. And so we did the same thing for water chemistry data sets and water level data sets across the GCD there. So we talk about this as a 3D hydrogeologic model, but the work we did has a far greater reach in terms of providing the district with several new avenues for access to data and opportunities to use that data here within Lee and Bastrop County. Yes.
Yeah, Vince, is there a set of instructions that a common stakeholder would be able to read in order to use the 3D model?
So the 3D model itself, we did not provide instructions for, and that's because the Leapfrog viewer has embedded instructions, kind of help me buttons. But if there is interest in some sort of live training, I could go about conducting that and we could do it in 20 or 30 minutes. I could even do some of it here today through this meeting. We have created instructions in the past, but what we've learned from GCDs is they just want live demos. They want tutorials. They want to get their hands on it, where the instructions are a little bit more cumbersome than a 15-20 minute tutorial in terms of actually using the 3D model, the 3D viewer itself. And as I mentioned, in the viewer, there are help buttons all over the place that give you information on what the tools do.
And you're gonna show us the
And
model.
I will today, and it's something that everyone has access to. As we've learned, not every computer can run the model, and so if anyone is having problems once they go to install it on their personal computers, we can create a light version, which is just one scene instead of 16 scenes, which still allows you to run the model without hopefully having any sort of latency issues as it relates to how that model is running on your personal computers.
Could I ask, Jim, can you, it's not mute, but take the side screen off so we can see the whole screen?
We're having a hard time seeing any.
This right here.
There you go. That's right. Thank you. Thank you.
And I realize based on my color choice, this one's coming out a little neon. But the point of this slide is that there's a lot of great research that covered the Lee and Bastrop County areas. A lot of that research that does exist, you can see overlaps in weird ways. Some of it covers just Bastrop County, some of it covers just Southern Lee County. And we're looking at the image on the right side of the screen here. But none of this data was specific to Lost Pines. This data was regional data. It was collected in terms of better understanding regional aquifer behaviors, the GAM program, the Groundwater Availability Modeling Program. That's really what a lot of this data that we're talking about is related to. There's some brackish studies that the Texas Water Development Board has conducted over the years. But once again, we're looking at regional studies. The goal of this was to create data and data sets that were specifically tailored to Lost Pines GCD. And so one of the early things we did here, and this is what I've talked about before, is we had to untangle all this data and then weave it all back together in a way that was coherent and was not redundant in terms of getting duplicate data points for the same well and whatnot. So early on, to develop the hydrogeologic model, the one thing we continue to emphasize was developing this detailed stratigraphy, detailed geologic frameworks. And I believe we may have emphasized that too much throughout this process here, where the reason we found that to be very important for Lost Pines is because we knew that there were data inconsistencies across these regional data sets. We knew that we had to make sense of where these inconsistencies were within those data sets to provide Lost Pines with something that was useful and informational. When I say inconsistencies across sources, one report from 20 years ago said the Simsboro's here, and a more recent report from just 4 years ago says the Simsboro's 300 feet lower. Is figuring out why the two were in disagreement and figuring out who is right and who is wrong. And sometimes they were both wrong. Sometimes they were both right. It was just how they were interpreting the formations, the geology. So another piece of this is we wanted to make sure we were better defining the Milano fault zone. So I have that highlighted on the screen here. That's all the fault structure that we see that runs from southern Bastrop County, kind of southwestern Bastrop County, all the way up through Lee County. This is where we have those graben structures that we've been talking about, where we have geology where it's almost like the geology falls out from underneath you as you're crossing Lee County, as you're crossing Bastrop County. We get these faults that create these huge dropped blocks of geology where the rocks literally sink 500 feet in the ground. And then we have younger formations that are filling that void. And we get some inconsistencies in how those depositional, how that geology actually appears based on where these faults are. The other piece of all this is we wanted to make sure we're developing detailed geology so we could increase confidence in the groundwater analysis that we knew that we or others would be doing for the district in the future here. And then with that said, one of the goals of the district here, which is evident through the BOR grant that the district went after, is to develop a local groundwater flow model specific to Lost Pines. Groundwater flow models are predictive models that use geology data. So as a piece of all of this geology work that we've done, a primary focus of this was to make sure we were developing something that was going to be able to inform the groundwater flow model. If we put really good data in, we're going to get better results than if we put very poor data into the model. So making sure we had good geology data that we trusted and we felt good about is very important in terms of step one before you go to create the groundwater flow model. These local groundwater models, similar to the groundwater availability models that the Texas Water Development Board has created. They go through a geology phase of the model, then they go through the model building phase. That's exactly what we're doing here, but at this local scale, at this local level for Lost Pines. So I have this here just as a quick refresher. We're looking at all the aquifers across Lee and Bastrop County. I know we can't see what's on the left side of the screen here, but I've called out the various aquifers, everything from the young Colorado River alluvium down through the Yegua Jackson, all the way down to the Carrizo Wilcox. We are looking at everything. Here we commonly find ourselves just referring to the Carrizo Wilcox. That's the focus today. It may not be the focus tomorrow. So making sure that we're able to get a complete snapshot of all of the aquifers and groundwater resources within Lost Pines was a priority for us on this. We've also talked about how we go about increasing the reliability of the data, how we go about creating a detailed geologic model, and that's by adding more data points. If the models that were once created as regional models had 400 data points in them, that's a good start. But what we've done here is, you can't see it on this slide, so my apologies. It is in the report and it is in last month's slide deck there in front of you. But we've nearly doubled the well control across the board for every aquifer unit. And we did that by using geophysical logs. Geophysical logs are little electrical tools that they send down a water well. They send out electrical signals. This is just a very simplified way of discussing this that then tell us what the geology is at different depths within that specific well. We're able to make interpretations for where we believe the geology is at those single well locations. And then we can interpolate that out across both two-dimensional and three-dimensional spaces. And that's what this slide's attempting to show. What we have on the left side of the screen is what that representation of what all those data points look like as a point, an XY coordinate point at land surface. And what we're attempting to show on the right side of the screen here is what all those subsurface well control points look like that we use to then correlate and develop the geology. It looks like the screen over here on the right side is doing a little bit better, or in front of us is doing a little bit better job. But once again, this was in last month's slide deck, and we'll actually take a look at this here in a couple of minutes. So it's about increasing data density, which at the end of the day increases the reliability, the trustworthiness in our interpretations, assuming those interpretations are correct. So at the end of the day, what we showed last month were these different export surfaces from the model. We had on the left side here, the depth to the top of the Simsboro. On the right side here, this was Simsboro thickness. These are just 2D rasters that we were able to generate through developing the model. The reason we used the model to do this is because the model allowed us to account for faults, and it allowed the model also allows us to account for interpretations, both XY coordinates and also in the third dimension in that Z space. So because of the way we use the leapfrog model to create these surfaces, we know they're much more accurate than if we would have just used standard mapping techniques here. And then this next slide here, hopefully it shows up, is a demonstration of what that looks like. We have on the right side of the screen, we have some red colors, we have some blue colors. What we've done here is we've compared our surface to the Simsboro, or our Simsboro surface to the groundwater availability model Simsboro surface. And what we found is there's some areas where the dam surface is overestimating the elevation to the Simsboro by up to 700 feet. And that's what we're seeing in these blue areas. And you'll notice where that's really happening is right there along the edge of a fault, where the way that surface was initially created for the GAM, it didn't take into account that fault placement. And so we're getting quite a big shift there where it's actually overestimating that elevation, keeping it at a higher elevation. And then reds are where, blues where it's underestimating, my apologies, and reds where it's overestimating. So you can see we had quite a dramatic range there in terms of where it was overestimating in some areas, where it was underestimating in others. So I've already talked about this once. I'll talk about it again because this is a big primary takeaway from all this work, which is this is providing the geologic framework for a local groundwater model. And then this new data allows the district and its consultants, so me specifically, to quickly address and respond to questions. And what I have here on the next screen is an example of something that came up just a couple weeks ago. I received an email from Jim. He asked me to review a screen interval on a well. This was related to where a permittee was thinking about screening a well related to a permit application here. Within 5 minutes after getting this email, I had my GIS system open. I was able to put in the lat long coordinates for the well that Jim sent me, put those into my GIS program, hit enter. I was able to see that at that location, we had the Calvert Bluff at land surface down to around 400 feet where we hit the Simsboro. And then we had the Simsboro formation from 400 feet to around 858 feet. And so here within 15 minutes, I was able to turn around and provide Jim an answer to this question that without this data here, this is something that I may have spent close to an hour on previously because I would have had to pull out data points, look at geophysical logs. But this allowed me to quickly address one of Jim's questions here through the development of this research here. So just wanted to provide this one specific example here of how this actually played out here recently. So additional associated deliverables, I already touched on a couple of these early on here. This is what we've included in Appendix F of the report. A lot of these are GIS data sets. So on the right side of the screen here, I actually have ArcGIS, which is a GIS mapping software open. We have all these data sets plotted. They're plotted spatially. And so I'm just going to touch on a couple of these different deliverables that are in this data set. So one is a water well database. This was developed early in the 3D model process. This does include those water wells from those state databases that I referenced earlier. And this was something that we made sure we did early because this data was actually utilized when Alan Stanton was doing the water level monitoring recommendations. He was able to look at these data sets and pull data from these very quickly as part of that effort. And this is the same data we're now using once again as we do the registered well database review and update here for the district. So geologic interpretations, all of those interpretations, all those corresponding geophysical logs are within the appendix here. And what this allows us to do is anytime we do have a permit question that arises, we're able to quickly go and look at our reference materials. We're able to understand what the geology looks like. We have that virtual bore framework that I showed that allowed me to quickly orient myself. Well, we have all the source data now too. So whenever local issues do arise in a specific area, we can actually go back to the source data and we could try to better understand, is there a fault here? Is there something happening with the way the sands are transitioning from west to east across the property? These are now site-specific questions that we can more quickly answer and address. Water chemistry and water level data sets, we created these, but we unfortunately did not include these in the 3D model. This was primarily due to limited well control and that spatial distribution. One example is the Carrizo-Wilcox. We had a lot of good data in northern Lee County, no data in western Bastrop County. So what was happening is we would go to create water level surfaces. Those water level surfaces would project outward, and those water level surfaces were showing us that half of Bastrop County had water that should be artesian in terms of coming up above those well bores because we didn't have data points there to control that water level surface. So we were running into problems in terms of what this looked like when we put this data in the 3D model. With more data, we can go back and add these as data points. But what we learned is if we include this data right now, it's going to provide some misleading results. Water chemistry was another one. We have a lot of great outcrop data for water chemistry. It shows a lot of fresh water. But then as you move down dip, very limited to no control. So it's showing fresh water in the far down dip sections of some of these aquifers. So this is something that we like to typically include, but we felt like because of current data constraints, that if we included this in the 3D model, it might be misinterpreted and it might actually be misused. And so we thought, hey, we'll include these data sets now. We'll continue to help the district collect more data. And then hopefully one day in the not too distant future, we can go back and add some of these. And just a continuation, aquifer property data, what we have on the right side of the screen here is is hydraulic conductivity data from the GAM plotted on top of the Simsboro surface. So it shows us where that aquifer is more easily able to transmit water, or it's less easily able to transmit or move water through in that pore space there. Video animations, this is something we'd like to do. We have not done this yet. We usually work with the district and make this kind of a collaborative effort. We figure out how the district may want to use this. We put together a couple 2 to 3 minute animations that we either narrate or we allow the district to narrate that describes what's happening with the geology. This is something that is usually created and then hosted on a website, or is something that's used in classrooms, put on a YouTube channel and shared. So it's going to be up to the district to kind of figure out how the district may want to use this. But it's definitely something that we will do. It just hasn't been done yet, but it is something that is usually better being more of a collaborative effort. It's something that we will do, and it is part of what we've already agreed to do as part of the 3D model. Just need to find the time to work with the district and the staff. And now that you'll have a new education outreach coordinator, perfect timing probably on something like that. The virtual bore framework, already talked about that. That's something that will plug into the online system. We also said we are going to do the oil and gas and lignite inventory. That task was never authorized, so that's why that never made it into the 3D model. And then the other thing we said we were going to do is aquifer designations. And we created those and just wanted to reiterate that we're going to improve upon those with the database update and review. Thank you for bearing with me through all that here. Now we're actually going to do the demo.
You hit the
full screen.
Can we turn down the lights or something? Maybe?
Yeah, we're gonna have to tweak the colors. And the,
And it was, this one seemed to show the.
yeah, we're gonna have to work with the TVs and adjust the colors and
We
the
could turn out some of these
the
bright
pixels and
lights,
stuff.
maybe.
Yeah.
Turn
Turn
that
that
so
off.
much glare.
Is this a switch
Or
or
that
that's
way.
the lights? Is that like to get
It's all or nothing.
That's okay.
Please don't fall asleep on me.
Oh, thanks.
That's always my greatest fear when the lights come off. So what we actually have right now is, let me see if I can. So it looks like that top banner is going to stay there from the Zoom. Oh, there we go. What we have right now is the Leapfrog viewer workspace open. I've mentioned before, it's similar to a PDF. You open it, it opens in a couple seconds, and then you're able to interact with the document. What we see on the left side of the screen is where a lot of this is interactive, where I'm actually able to turn off different aspects of the geology. That's what I'm doing right now by clicking on these icons to the left, which I know are a little hard to see, but they're eyes, so it's I can see you or I can't see you. But it allows you to interact with the data itself. So if you were specifically interested in, and let's see if I can do this here. Limited eyesight. If you're specifically interested in say,
The Hooper.
the Hooper, is that what that is? Okay. It's leading me now.
Yeah, it's cutting off. All it says, I can't see.
Yeah. But the point here is all this data we provide it as a scene, which is a predefined way of representing the data that's available within that specific scene. But all that data is interactive. And what I'm doing right now is I'm just clicking on the mouse, and then you're able to reorient the model, look at it from different perspectives. And I'll actually change to the next scene, which I know is going to be a little bit easier on the eyes. We have the surface geology at land surface on this. And I'm literally just clicking down on the mouse, and then I'm able to drag and reorient the geology. And from this perspective, we're seeing that the outside boundaries. But one of the cool things that we're able to do with this is there's actually tools that we can interact with or use the model or use to interact with the model. So I have a cross-section tool I'm using right now, going pretty much right across the Tanglewood Graben that we keep discussing. And what I'm now able to do is actually go in and examine what's actually happening there within the Tanglewood Graben as it relates to the geology. You may not understand which color corresponds to the legend over here on the right. One of the cool fun things you can do is you can actually click on each model layer itself, and let's see, it's running a little slow. It then pops up and it tells me that that's the Queen City sand layer there. And so what we'll do now is we'll actually take a look at we can actually start taking a look at the geology to better understand what's actually happening in that Tanglewood Graben area. There's some shortcuts I can use with the keyboard, so just bear with me as I go through this with just the mouse. But what we're able to do is actually take a look at how some of these offsets are actually taking place here within the Graben as it relates to the fault. These different colored markers are related to the well control points that we use to create all this. But what I'm going to do right now is limit us to just the Simsboro well control and then the Simsboro surface. Simsboro.
Each of those dots is a registered well.
So not a registered water well. Each of these dots is where we had a well control point from one of those geophysical logs. So a lot of these are actually oil and gas wells where we were able to pull this data. But these were at one point in time a well location. And most of these are probably plugged in abandoned wells at this point in time. But what I'm now able to do here, and what I'm going to demo is we're able to actually move across this fault here to really understand what these offsets look like and how dramatic some of these offsets actually are. So we're looking at the Simsboro formation right now, but what I'm going to do now is also turn on the Carrizo above it. So this is where you can start playing around with the data, and we have other scenes that allow us to take a look at where the water wells are as it relates to all this, but this is how we're able to look at the data, better understand what's happening in a specific area, all within this viewer workspace. And try to address some complex questions that may arise. If Jim has a landowner that comes in and he's been hearing about the Tanglewood Graben, has no idea what we're talking about, this is how we actually go and take a look at these things. And what we have on the screen right here is actually what that Graben looks like. We have these down dropped blocks, but then we have this one right here that's dropped a little bit lower than the next one. This is that Graben structure that kind of forms a U shape right here that we're referring to. Now, this section that's up higher here, the purple section, this is the Carrizo. And you notice that this the downside of this lip is much higher than the rest of the Carrizo. It's the well owners that are on this part of the Carrizo formation on this side of the Graben. Those are the well owners that are currently most at risk from the drawdowns occurring there as it relates to those regional declines we're seeing. So it's this area right here that we're able to really isolate and identify as being a primary area of concern because of the way this geology actually exists here in this area. If we think about our water level surfaces, those potentiometric surfaces, you can better understand how that's happening as that regional water level surface is lowering. It's going to lower across this point in time before it lowers across these points in time over here, just based on the way that elevation is on that surface, it being at a higher point. Yes.
So, I mean, is there any way you can show us how, if somebody had the latitude and longitude of their well, they could take a look at that spot?
So that's the one thing that this model cannot do. But what we've done in the past is we've worked so I have the model where we're just looking at the Carrizo again, but what I'm going to do now is actually turn back on one of our reference layers, navigate to it.
I believe the board tool, you can select GPS coordinates and then you can drill down using the board.
And that's how you're going to determine, that's how you're going to assign aquifers to the well.
So I'll use the surfaces directly from this, but the boring tool that President Hernandez is referring to, that's what I was able to use when Jim sent me an email, and within 15 minutes I was able to answer his question. But what we have here is we have reference layers. And so if someone knows that their property is a couple miles north of, we'll just say Lexington once again, just east of 77, and we're able to zoom in a little bit, and they know they're off of I forget what this road is here, but this is where all those 410, 411. What I can do is I can actually take this tool here and I can be pretty exact where it's cutting, and you'll notice it cuts across the entire model. That's the one unfortunate thing. But now I'm able to spin the model and actually take a look at that geology and I can kind of toggle back and forth. But what I've now done is I've pretty much narrowed my search to that specific area by using that reference layer, that aerial imagery here. And then once again, I nailed that road. And we also then nailed this up block of that Graben structure. And once again, this is that section we're really concerned with based on that regional water level decline. The people that are north of it, they have a lot more artesian pressure from that top of that surface. And so once again, this whole section here is different story than what's happening over here.
Now, you're
This-
showing us a section that where they're having all the issues right now.
So,
That's east of 77.
Teresa?
yes, this is the Carrizo east of 77 and
Thank you.
411.
yeah, so here's 411 right here. Here's where it makes a little loop.
Right.
And so we're then able to orient ourselves right under that through this tool. And the next scene I have here actually has all the water wells in it. I should have been using that. My apologies. But we could do the same thing with that and actually.
Is the model as detailed for Bastrop County as it is for Lee County?
We spent just as much time on Bastrop County as we did Lee County. That's correct. But I'm going to show. So as you can see, I'm not clicking many buttons. It's the same buttons over and over again. And that's why I was saying that these models, they may seem to be as if they're not super user friendly, but within about 20 minutes of training, we can usually bring people up to speed. Go to the keyboard just so I can change something here. So what we're looking at now are actual water wells in that same area. And then just like before, I can actually click on these and then start to better understand whose wells completed where. And so this is Charles Ramsey. But what we can do is we can actually then mess with the transparency of these formations. And thank you for your patience. I know this isn't the easiest to see right now. So right now, I'm playing around with the transparency. Then allows me to see kind of whose wells are completed deeper into the Carrizo, whose wells may be completed shallower. And so Mr. Ramsey's well is completed fairly far into that Carrizo section, whereas this next well here isn't completed nearly as deep into it. So
Let's build the roads.
yeah. So this is how we can actually. This is actually how we can use that information to better understand what's actually happening within the aquifer systems. And we have different scenes that are predefined for each different layer here. I could click on all those, but I'll save the time. But the last one I'll get to here is this is the GAM hydraulic conductivity data. So as we talk about the GAMs, this is actually where you can go in and actually look at that GAM data as it relates specifically to the aquifers. So I know about 5 minutes with the lights off is usually about all I can get away with. So I'm going to turn those back on now.
Okay, we just can't, cannot see it very well without.
And I'll end it here and would be happy to address any questions. And I think this is meant to be kind of a living, evolving project that does evolve with the district's needs. About 6 years ago, we developed a 3D model for Middle Pecos GCD. They started having well blowout issues. Some of y'all may have heard about Lake Beamer or Beamer Lake and some of the old flowing oil and gas wells where we actually used their 3D model. We plugged in these old boreholes, old oil and gas boreholes, and we're better able to understand where this water was coming from, why these wells were problematic. And we've done similar things with others. Really, it's about addressing whatever the district's specific needs are. With Clearwater, we looked at faults and how those are creating no flow barriers. It's just whatever ends up coming up down the pipe and trying to figure out if this may be a solution or a path forward to help address those issues.
Ben, you had said that you used in developing this a lot of the old oil and gas logs.
That's correct.
Logs on this.
Yes.
Okay, going forward to get more data, are we going to have to start doing more drilling on this? Or you mentioned that there were areas that you didn't have sufficient amount of data to go into different things. How do we get there? Or what method can data be collected? Put it that way.
So you just brought up a point I would like to add a little bit of clarity on. We didn't just use oil and gas well records. We also used production well records where we had some of those geophysical logs from production permits. We used public water supply wells. Those have geophysical logs run on them. So we did bring in some water wells. Moving forward, it is going to be water wells. That's where we get new data. There are areas where we still have data that we didn't evaluate. We're looking for a good, even distribution of data. That includes both Lee and Bastrop County. Because of that, there may be a very localized area where we actually have another 2 or 3 data points that we could go back and look at. They just didn't make it into this first round of points that were evaluated. So there's still a lot of oil and gas data out there. But then it's going to be the new water wells that are drilled. That's where we will get new data. But the first place to look is always, okay, this area is becoming an area of concern for us. Do we already have data here? No. Okay, well, when these wells are drilled, we'll want to make sure that we plug in those new data points, those new geophysical logs into the model as quickly as possible to update that area.
Okay, now these are all the wells that say aqua or dwelling, or wells that individual property owners are drilling.
And so individual property owners, they're usually not running a geophysical log. And so we're not using those. And I guess a little additional clarity there. So aqua, when they have a well filled with 5 wells in it, and we've already included 3 geophysical logs from oil and gas wells, we didn't go then grab all 5 aqua permit wells in that same field. We maybe only looked at 1 or 2 of them. And that was just because we were just wasting time and resources if we went in and we added all those in terms of what the goal was at this moment in time, which was complete coverage across Bastrop and Lee County, across all aquifers. So there is room for improvement. There is data out there that we already have that is part of what we've already done in terms of the data harmonization kind of cleanup phase early on here, where we know where there's additional data points still that we could use. The question is, at this point in time, where is that most important? Is that important? If the district uses this for a year and realizes that everything's gravy, well, there may not be anything to update. But if we do identify, hey, there's this one area in southern Bastrop County where things seem to be a little off, is there any other data that we can go in there to add new data points on? That's always something we could do later.
Okay, but would it be that the district here would be paying to actually drill some of these wells to get some of this data? That's the point.
No, I don't think that would be necessary. Once again, going back and looking at those oil and gas records first is the cheapest option, of course. And then working with your permittees to make sure we're getting geophysical logs is the next best option on something like that.
And that is part of your recommendation. Your second recommendation is annual updates
Yes.
to account for new data. And then your third one says review the not reviewed well
Right.
data set. So those two are conclusions that you came to, recommendations.
Right.
We're annually updating it, and there are some data that we could go back to. It's on this very last page of this presentation.
Yes, Director
Hey, Ben.
Rogers.
Some of us are not steeped in hydrologic education, so I'll just be on another end of it. So let's say we have a permit application come in for a non-exempt well. And I always assume they've had a geologist or someone helping them choose their desired location for their well. So then we send it to you for review. You pull this out. I mean, will you have more information to reflect on because of this than they do? Or why don't they just go to this to begin with, and then we all have the same information, and then we avoid some of the conflict over locations, or what? Can you talk to me about that?
So knowing the regulars that normally work in this area,
Uh-huh.
they're already getting their hands on this data, or they're
Right.
going to as soon as they can. So,
Right. So we just all have the same.
so everyone will have access to this data. That's a part of this. But what will happen is these permits will come up. They will have wells that they are giving us lat long coordinates for, XY coordinates for. They are providing us a recommended well depth, a well screen interval. And this allows me to very quickly go check all of that, where prior to having this data in hand, something like that on a one-off basis takes anywhere from an hour or two just to go back and wrap your head around that specific study area, what data is available to us. Now we're taking that 1 to 2 hours down to 10 or 15 minutes in terms of how quickly we're able to orient ourselves with a specific permit, with their specific property. This is something we used to joke about is this takes a lot of power out of the consultant's hands and puts it into the district's hands. And that's not usually a good business model for consultants. But the goal is to help the district and provide the district with opportunities and pathways to be more efficient in terms of how we're going about using district resources, but also to empower Jim, the staff, the board to make informed decisions without necessarily having to lean on me or other consultants that the district may be using down the road. So this is about empowering the district, and that specifically is something that is empowering your staff to do a quick review of these applications as they come across their desk. And it's also allowing me to save some district resources down the road in terms of how much time it takes me to evaluate something like this.
For instance, Jim can dial it up and look at before it gets sent over to you, which he probably
Or
know.
from another perspective, a smaller consulting group submitted an application and their test well was completed in a formation while their application in one formation while their application was for a different, because they didn't know that.
You can sort that out early.
Yeah.
on.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Okay.
Without having to involve events or anything else.
So it could speed up the application process.
In theory, yes.
Okay.
And make it more precise.
Yeah.
As well.
Okay.
And this sets the foundation for the future. This is like laying the bricks of our foundation, and then we can build upon this. So all the future work and other studies that we've tasked recently during the drawdown studies, the updating our well database, this is, laying the foundation to get better data, more precise data, and that we can build upon this in the future.
And that's a great point. The drawdown study specifically, we would have had a 2 or 3x that task order in terms of that budget if we didn't have this data. This data allows us to do that drawdown study now, where without it, we would have been starting from the ground floor, building our way up for a one-off study. Now that we have the 3D hydrogeologic model, those associated tools, specifically our aquifer surfaces, it reduced a substantial cost burden that would have been associated with that project otherwise. Yes.
From a broader perspective, this looks like it's something that you could use as a predictive tool, not just for this district. What I'm thinking is like what happened over in Burleson County. You could have known that was going to happen.
And I think using the word predictive, there's different ways of being predictive. This is going to plug into a predictive groundwater model. So a groundwater flow model is what the district received the BOR grant for. All of this information is going to feed into that predictive groundwater flow model. But what we can do with this data now is we can predict well depths. We can use this data to predict when aquifers are going to become unconfined. So there are a lot of derivative predictive spin-offs from this data. This model itself is actually static. It's not dynamic in terms of how it's able to predict, but because of this model, there's a half dozen to a dozen different spin-off use cases that are predictive and can be predictive. And the most important one is that local groundwater flow model.
I guess what I'm asking though is this is confined to our district.
It is.
Okay. But if you took a tool like this and took it to a higher level. The water board did the whole thing. You would know in advance who was doing what to whom before it happened.
All in the Northern Lake County.
Locally.
But you can't control what happens over there. That's what happened.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
If
correct.
you take
We have,
it to a broader
yeah,
level,
we
a
don't have
higher
control
level.
outside our district.
And I can guarantee you this data is going to work its way into the regional models here down the road. And what we saw with Northern Lake County, that Graben structure, the slide that I showed early on that showed the differences between the GAMs, there were some misrepresentations of that geology, which is why there were some miscalculations in terms of what drawdowns look like up there. In terms of that, because there were unknown factors, because we were thinking about it from a regional point of view, not that local point of view. And so it's these local studies, these local models that ultimately feed back into the regional models, feed back into the Texas Water Development Board data sets, and at the end of the day, lead to better data for the region. So although Lost Pines made this investment, it will down the road eventually benefit the state of Texas, just the way that there's a trickle up effect that actually takes place from this work.
That's what I was
Yeah.
going with, you know,
Mhm.
this is a great start. I
Yeah.
mean,
And Post Oak last year did get a Bureau Reclamation grant, and they also are using that to improve their model locally. And then we this year got our Bureau Reclamation grant where we're going to improve the model locally as well. So hopefully more and more
those
districts,
surprises will.
more and more districts will start improving the model because the state funding is, I guess, we
Maybe
need
we
more.
could sell it.
We need more state funding to.
Could we sell it? Can
I
we
don't think so.
sell
I think it'd be best just
I
to.
think this is public information now.
Yes.
it?
Yeah, this is public information. We want people to use this.
And Director Smith, is there a question I could
No.
address for you? Okay.
Any other questions for Vince? Thank you, Vince.
Can we ask questions?
You can ask it afterwards. You can grab him and talk. He'll stick. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vince.
Thank you, Vincent. Good job. Absolutely.
Yeah, this is real fundamental work that's going to be useful for future. And again, we'll just build upon it. We can do all sorts of other studies and as you mentioned, moving forward. So
To spread it out, you could save a lot of grief for a lot of folks. By knowing what we can.
So agenda item now, moving on to 4D, a discussion of the 9 statutory factors that must be considered before Groundwater Management Area 12 votes on the desired future conditions. This is on the agenda. GMA 12 is starting to evaluate the 9 factors. They're doing it 3 at a time at the GMA 12. So we brought it here to discuss it here tonight.
Second, I hope. Thank you, President Hernandez, members of the board. Actually, thank you, Vice President Hernandez, because a lot of these are your slides that you helped prepare and we've talked through. So this was brought as part of the conversation stemming from some of the actions that occurred at GMA 12 in the past cycle, or especially in the past couple of months. So the 9 factors that have to be weighed by the GMA 12 in developing a new DFC. They start with aquifer uses and conditions. It includes water supply needs strategies, which is basically information that's gleaned from the regional water plan. So that's what are the needs of water user groups within each region? What are the strategies that go into meeting those water demands? The districts need to look at the current hydrologic conditions, which is basically another way of saying where aquifer uses and conditions may be more about the water levels in the aquifers themselves. The hydrologic conditions gives you room to look at those interactions with the environment beyond just strictly groundwater. So surface water, groundwater interactions, any other hydrologic conditions related to the aquifer that could all be considered under factor 3. Factor 4 is our other environmental impacts, which is a kind of a catch-all for, again, it kind of overlaps with hydrologic conditions, but it's another catch-all. The fifth consideration is subsidence. which is the lowering and compaction of clay soils that results when you take water out of groundwater out of formations. Typically, subsidence has not been an issue within this area. It's more of a factor with younger clay formations. So you see a lot more in coastal areas than you do in these older formations like we have. Sixth factor is socioeconomic impacts. It could be impacts, to both, and ideally, socioeconomic impacts would be a balance of both impacts on local landowners and how it changes socioeconomics in the producing zones, as well as the socioeconomic impacts of water being sent to other areas. But historically, all we're provided by the state is here's what happens to the economy if you don't give water to urban areas. So that one is definitely one that's a little, it's unbalanced. 7 is private property rights and how the DFCs impact private property rights. And the general position of the GMA 12 has been that the DFCs themselves do not affect private property rights. It's how districts choose to implement those DFCs that would have an impact on private property rights.
Jim,
Yes, ma'am.
couldn't number 7 be part of number 6? Because the private property rights are usually socioeconomic. Right. I'm wondering if there's another way to look at it. I was trying to figure out what it would be.
These are derived from statutes.
Yeah.
So, the legislature broke those out into separate considerations, but you're right, they could be lumped in and, if we get the legislature to go back and make it the 8 factors.
Well, I just thought
For
maybe.
example, number 1 and number 3 have overlaps as well.
1, 3, and 4, yeah.
1, 3, and 4 have overlaps. So there's a lot of redundancy and overlap in these factors.
And part of the consideration, when you think about how these laws are drafted, it may not make sense. Every one of these may not make sense in our formation, but they may make more sense over the karst formation of the Edwards, or they may make more sense over the Ogallala. And so there are essentially 3 different systems that are being considered when these are being drafted. But yeah, ideally we could whittle some of these down. The 8th consideration is the feasibility of achieving DFCs, which comes down to really it's a question of modeling. You can't have a district with a DFC of 0 drawdown right next to a district with a DFC of 300 feet of drawdown. So we've got to make sure that the DFCs can be balanced and actually can be achieved, both from a geographic spectrum and then also from a production-based spectrum. So if you've got way more pumping than you do drawdown, it's not a feasible DFC. So that last factor is really a modeling exercise that has to be considered. And then just because we've already gone through a couple of general ones, the 9th factor is anything else. Literally anything. Not one that's usually heavily relied upon in the GMA process, but it is included for anything else that's brought in that we feel, warrants consideration.
So these factors aren't used to create the DFC. They're just factors that you need to analyze, to consider in when you create the DFC. Before you vote on it, you need to consider these 9 factors, but they're not factors necessarily to create the DFC. Or they could be.
They could be.
They could be.
And of course, there is no statutory definition of what consideration is. So consideration could be
just that we looked at it.
We looked at it, or we heard a comment about it, or we spent 9 months doing a study on it.
It could be either.
Yeah. So
the factors don't necessarily have equal weight.
That is my
They
question. Weighted by.
in theory, yes, they are all equally weighted. Yes, sir.
Yeah, this all has to go with, all has to be addressed in the explanatory report,
Yes.
not just.
Yes.
When you read them, you can tell some GMAs have done socioeconomic analysis and most have not. So there's a lot of, everybody.
Yes, these slides capture what's currently in our explanatory report. Let's see that.
Can't see.
Can you move if you move the mouse from the top, maybe that top will go away?
Oh,
There you go.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. Just wasn't reading my mouse. Okay, so the first condition is kind of touched on, it's aquifer uses and conditions, really looking at a district level within the GMA, within the groundwater management area. What are the existing permits? What are the current uses of water for each district? And how is that impacting the water levels? We all know if we go back 10 years, the district had a decent number of permits outstanding, but water levels were relatively static. We weren't seeing a lot of movement, anywhere really aside from the Simsboro, and even they were fairly minor. As more districts have begun producing, we began to see more changes in water levels. So as those uses are changing, as more export projects are coming online, both within Lost Pines or within adjacent districts, that is having an impact on water conditions, and that's one of the considerations. The hydraulic conditions, it's where there are a couple of model-derived statistics that come into this consideration. The first one I've spoken about before, which is TERS. It's the total estimated recoverable storage. It's a model-derived statistic. They basically took grid cells, looked at the saturated thickness of the aquifer within a grid cell, and then back calculated how much water would be within that grid cell. Whether it's economically feasible to recover it, whether it could physically be recovered, doesn't really get factored in. It's just the total estimated recoverable storage is the amount of water that they believe is in a grid cell. It's a number we get beat over the head with a lot at the legislature and in permitting, but it's there. But it's another one of those pieces of information that there is no counterbalance to. I believe Eddie Lucio, legislature had suggested having a total sustainable recoverable yield, and that never got anywhere in the last couple of cycles. But that would have at least given us some counterbalance. Other factors that come into the hydrologic condition are the estimated inflows, outflows, and discharge. So basically how water is moving between the formations within the districts, within the GMA, and how that may be changing over time as water levels fluctuate. And all of that gets wrapped into the hydrologic conditions we would consider. As I mentioned, water supply needs is really just looking at water, going through the state water plan and saying these are the demands that remain unmet. These are the demands that different water user groups think they'll meet with groundwater. These are the strategies that are being applied to meet those needs over the next 50 years. It has to be looked at and evaluated as part of the development of the DFCs. So that is where that water supply needs comes from. It's really looking at how those projected demands are coming back from the other state planning groups, and how that would tie in with our DFCs that are being developed at the GMA level. So we kind of touched on these environmental impacts. Is really the interaction between groundwater and surface water. All the environmental impacts between the production of groundwater and the environment within the district. Subsidence, as we talked about, that's the compaction and lowering of land surface. Socioeconomic impacts really come down to gains. It's a soft science. It's gains and benefits from landowners within the district, people that are selling their water and gaining a benefit from it, neighbors that are not selling that water and basically suffering a deficit for it. All of that goes into socioeconomic considerations in theory.
So, Jim, what would you say that's socioeconomic impacts are soft?
I say that as difference between a hard science and soft science.
In the next couple of slides, it gets into a little bit more detail.
I apologize. That was a little bit of my biochemist coming out.
I got you.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Quantitative instead of qualitative.
Well, even more than that, when you look at hard science, where something is 99.999% sure versus soft sciences, where 80% is pretty good.
80-20.
Like I say, a little bit of biochemistry arrogance creeping through. I apologize. As we mentioned the interest in private property rights, whether that can be looped in with socioeconomic impacts, which makes perfect sense, but not referenced in the legislature. So that's a separate consideration. Questions about feasibility. Again, can the DFCs be achieved by the districts, and are the DFCs feasible between districts so that you have a major cliff of 0 and 300 feet drawdowns between districts? And then the last consideration, that anything else. President Hernandez, you included this. The district shall consider the groundwater availability models. I mentioned the groundwater availability model kind of factors in at several different points, and it's used as a tool in the feasibility studies, especially for future DFCs. But Did you have something in particular in mind when you included this line?
No, just wanted to make sure everyone knew that it's in the law.
Better or worse? But again, what is consideration? So,
Because you have the 9 factors to consider,
right.
but then they also separately, in a separate paragraph says, well, you should also consider the models. So really, this kind of might be 10 factors if you add that.
Although, as I said, it really comes into, especially the groundwater feasibility, the feasibility studies, stuff like that. That's really where.
That's really, that's
Right.
really.
We could read tea leaves, or we could use the model. The model seems to be more accurate. So, the timeline for approving the next round of DFCs is going to be the end of January or early January of 2027. So we've got about 3 years. Seems like a lot less, but
2.5.
2.5. We've got 2.5 years to get through this process.
We're halfway through the process.
I believe the purpose tonight was just to start this discussion. We'll come back and revisit these items. Is that your intent?
If need be, yeah.
Okay. So the idea tonight was really just to kind of go through the factors, have any discussion or any question you may have, and then we'll revisit this as we go forward. I'm not sure all of these slides made it into my deck, so I'll put them in here. So a couple of options that have come up in discussions here at the district in the past couple of weeks is developing standardized lists of definitions in terms of uses, looking at how the state defines different types of uses, how different GCDs look at them. There's a little bit of flexibility there between what may be considered, not what is exempt and non-exempt, but what is agricultural irrigation versus a municipal, like a municipal type irrigation. A good example being Thomas turf grass. Is growing turf grass really considered ag, or should that be a different type of irrigation? So trying to standardize that across the GMA or within districts. Exempt and non-exempt is pretty well characterized. We don't have a lot of wiggle room there. So there's not a lot of room for how districts might be defining that, but we could revisit the point at the GMA level and make sure that everybody is on the same page in that regard, just in how we're defining some of these things. There's been a lot of push at the legislature to have districts have common rules. Even though we have different aquifers, we have different population pressures, we have different uses and patterns, there's still a belief that we should all more or less be the same. So this might help and go a long way in alleviating some of that pressure at the legislative level to show that we are working, well, we may not have the same rules, we are at least all using the same words the same way. Everybody's calling a ball, and a strike. So that may be something we can evaluate at the GMA level. One of the challenges at GMA 12 is that we are split between 4 different regional planning groups. Lost Pines is split between Region K, which is Bastrop County, and Region G, which is where Lee County is located. Region G is the entirety of the Brazos River Basin. So there are a lot of different interests in Region G. There are a lot of different interests in Region K. Additionally, we also catch regions C and A, which are further up on the Trinity, and then I think H is Gonzales or Guadalupe. I may be mistaken. But in terms of the regional planning process, we have a lot of different pressures that are coming in from multiple different regions that are developing under different patterns. But all of that has to be considered and factored into the DFC development. In 2021, GMA 12's GCDs allocated really 300,000 more. 300,000 acre feet per year more than what was anticipated in the regional plan at that time. We'll have to see how that factors back in this cycle. When you look at state water plans, we have water user groups, which is anything from the major city like Austin to Lee County Freshwater Supply, which covers basically dime box. So that the water user groups have a wide range, and state water plan accounts for all of the needs and all of the demands for all of those water user groups over the next 50 years. The first step of the exercise is collecting all that demand information. Second step is collecting supply information and then coming up with strategies to help the demands or to help the supply meet the demands. It'd be nice to see it go the other direction and make the demand meet the supply, but that's not really the process that the water user groups go through. Yes, ma'am.
Is the I-35 corridor one of those groups, or is that something that just sort of hatched out?
So in the state's infinite wisdom, all of the water planning groups are based on river basins, which basically run west, kind of northwest to southeast. All of the groundwater management groups are based on aquifers, which kind of run from southeast or southwest to northeast. So you have overlapping groups. So the I-35 corridor just runs across probably 5 or 6 of those different surface planning. It's just how they've decided to break up the state. But within that, like I said, you end up with GMAs that are now running across 4 separate regional planning groups because they're running more or less perpendicular to each other. Yep, but so matching supply, match the regional water groups try to match supply and demand through different strategies. And then the supply from groundwater is based on the managed available groundwater developed as part of the DFC process. So they take the maximum available from groundwater available from the DFC process and use that as a cap in their planning process. Per any strategy that doesn't fit underneath the managed available groundwater for a particular county is excluded from the plan, which is going to become, I think, more of a fight going forward of people wanting to see higher max to make sure that their projects fit into the state plan. My experience, they don't like being called socialist when you mention that to them. Yeah, so as I previously mentioned, hydrologic condition, one of the other hydrologic conditions is this number, it's called TERS. It typically looks at the 25%, 50%, and 75% availability of any formation that's being considered. There are a lot of problems with how the TERS is developed, and that Bob Mace, from the Water Development Board, has spoken on the record about the problems with how TERS is developed and applied. But it is a number that's out there. It's a state number. It comes from the Water Development Board. Even though we know there are problems with it, it still carries weight. So it's something to be aware of, something that has to be considered during the DFC process. But I would say even more so than socioeconomic numbers, TERS is really problematic in terms of its application. So as Vince mentioned, we do have the expanded, the expanded stratigraphy, which will help give us a better handle on how the aquifers within the district are actually physically structured. Based on that, we have the grant from the Bureau of Reclamation to try and develop our local area groundwater flow model, which will give us a better handle on water budgets, looking at how water moves between the counties, how water is moving in and out of the district into neighboring districts, and even how we get some surface water and groundwater exchange based on the data that we have. Additionally, you as a board have authorized LRE to do a new form of analysis looking at drawdowns and available remaining drawdowns based on work that was already done up in the Lexington area. This will give us a better handle on basically looking at what our current conditions are, how those current conditions have changed over the past 5 to 10 years, and will help us developing a better understanding of how future production will impact the citizens of Lee and Bastrop County. All of these numbers, a lot of these are deliverables that will be done during the DFC cycle. So some of it may be in time for consideration in this cycle. Some of it may have to be brought in and used in future cycles. The DFC cycle being a 5-year repeating cycle, while it is kind of a hassle, it also does give us some flexibility in terms of literally as soon as it's adopted, the process starts again and any new information can be reintroduced. One of the things that Elvis and I talked about was the fact that the modeling does not include assumptions about future permits. And if we were doing this once every 50 years, that would be an issue, I think. If we weren't making any guesses about what permits will come in, that would be a problem. But the fact that every 5 years the process repeats, all the data is updated, everything new is brought, everything new within districts is brought in. That gives us the ability to capture that on a more or less continuous basis rather than trying to project out how we think permits will grow over the next 50 years. It's different approaches, but the repeating cycle does have some benefits for us. Overall, there was one study, I think by LRE.
Statewide study,
Yes.
Texas Water Development Board statewide study, yes.
That said that there was an issue of a chance of subsidence within the district. We have not seen evidence of subsidence within the district. Other districts within the GMA that have significantly higher pumping than what we have never seen signs of subsidence. Like I say, subsidence is typically an issue along the Gulf Coast where you have younger clay formations that are being impacted. Part of the management plan does include looking for subsidence, but it's really not a consideration we put much weight on at this point in time, especially at GMA 12 level. Socioeconomic impacts, I believe Vince is working on a new method for us to possibly get some data for that to help support or to provide a counterbalance to the data that's provided by the state in terms of what local impacts and local, I'm not going to put your mouth. I know you got that for next month, I think.
The board members have a draft proposal.
Okay. I didn't realize it already come in. So we will be looking at that coming back to, over the summer and talking about some ways we can try and develop some more counterbalancing socioeconomic information. As I said in the past, if I had had my preference, we would have dropped socioeconomic as a consideration because it wasn't balanced. But hopefully with the, Vince's studies or his proposal, we may be able to bring some balance to that consideration. And again, socioeconomic considerations in a groundwater district is one more expert. I mean, we've got lawyers, we've got hydrogeologists, and now we're supposed to have economists as well. So it's really not in the wheelhouse of anybody that's on board with the district. But like I say, we'll meet next month or either next month or in August to discuss Vincent's proposals and see.
It is something that gets thrown out to us as a board,
It
You're
is.
gonna hurt somebody's chance of making money.
Well, and that is the other issue. Is that socioeconomics is not only about the cost; it's about the impact, the loss of property rights by being denied the ability to produce.
Or reduction, whatever will say property is not worth as much when you sell it 10 years from now.
Or it's not worth what people can't use it for what they purchased it for if they
Right.
want. David Van Dresser, Fayette County said it best, where he said the job of the GMA is to listen to both sides, people that want to produce and people that want to conserve, and find a way to make sure that everyone walks away angry. So he used a little more colorful language, but that's essentially where we're at with that.
And this statement is straight from the explanatory report.
Where did this statement come from?
Are the GMA 12 explanatory report to the Texas Water Development Board as part of the DFC?
Who wrote it?
That most likely was written by Andy Donnelly,
Andy was the editor. Andy Donnelly was the editor last cycle.
although it could have been any of the other consultants at
Yeah.
GMA, but Andy most likely drafted it.
This was late 2021.
Yeah, as I stated, in terms of property rights, it's the application of DFCs has an impact on property rights because the application of DFCs is what determines whether people can produce or not produce. The DFC itself is really, from a GMA perspective, the DFC does not impact property rights. It's how districts choose to apply it. And so in terms of considerations, given equal consideration, but it's really not an issue that drives any decision making because the real questions of property rights are going to be resolved at the district level based on the outcome of the GMA's action. So yeah, historically, and this is a kind of a detour through GMA history. the first cycle I participated in, 2 cycles back, everybody, if everybody's DFCs could be reproduced by the model within 10%, that was considered good enough. So we would say we would send our pumping files to the state and say, as long as everything's within 10% of what we requested, we're good. That allowed for some errors on their model, on part of their modelers, and it allowed for, any sort of mistakes in how the science was done, and it also allowed for a little bit of wiggle room in terms of lining up the DFCs between the different districts in the GMA. That process changed in later cycles where people started using that variance, not as a way to give us wiggle room on feasibility, but as a way to bump their numbers up or down based on the wishes of their district rather than, that they would kind of cheat their numbers down or up based on what they were trying to achieve with their DFCs. Last fall, Dr. Hoffman, I directed him to write a program for GMA 12.
Hutchinson.
Hutchinson. Write a program for GMA 12 that would remove the need for those variances. There's one program, everyone will use it. It'll be supplied to the state. So we can get rid of, everybody sets their DFCs and that's it. There's no plus or minus 10% that we consider, because no matter who runs the model, it should go the same.
Anything else? The last one.
Yeah, anything else, which is.
Anything else is just.
So, anything else can let, we had a guy 2 cycles back came in and talked to us about, I want to say it was Paleozoic ferns, and how he had evidence of Paleozoic ferns that, that wasn't anything else. It fell into the anything else category. We had nothing to do about it, and honestly, I just remember that presentation didn't make a whole lot of sense, but it technically met the category of anything else. So anything else can literally be any of the factors anything that doesn't fall into those 8 pre-existing factors.
Sounds like a endangered species. I mean,
It's even, if it didn't fit into the ecological category, it could be brought in as anything else. That's right. There's plenty of places I think where you can bring in endangered species.
but ultimately, the DFCs come down to the vote of 5 districts,
Yes, ma'am.
and 3-2 can win.
It requires a super majority, so it needs to be a 4-1 vote.
Only the DSC vote at the GMA 12 requires a 2/3 supermajority vote for 4-1. All other motions and votes at the GMA 12 just require a simple majority.
We got voted down last
We
time.
were 4-1, right?
Yeah.
No, it was 3-2.
Then how did it get reconciled?
It was 3-2, and then
Somebody
gave
gave
in.
another motion was to make it. Another motion was made, then became 4-1.
Yeah, Gary Westbrook gave in because the first time he was gonna
Yeah, he.
be on our
Yes,
side.
that's what I thought. Okay. Okay.
So, like I say, this was meant to be an introduction, just to kind of touch on the basics of the planning process, and then I know last year I think I came back with 2 or 3 memos from GMA 12 asking for input and guidance. So hopefully with this, as we begin to work that process, either through presentations or through memos, we'll gather that feedback from you as a board and take that back up to the GMA level and continue working on it from there.
When's our next meeting?
It has not been set yet. I was kind of hoping that would be set, but it's late July is all I know. Late July, early August. But it'll be after our next board meeting. So I'll be able to inform you at the July meeting of what our next one is.
Any other questions for Jim? Jim, can you stop the share?
And I believe the next item should have been strictly limited to the general manager's report rather than being an action item. So,
Right, on the agenda.
yes, sir.
Yeah,
This action. So do we need to approve this?
no. No, we do not.
So the action is just
Actions.
in here.
No, we're still in D, which is just discussion.
So so we're done with D.
Yes, sir.
All right.
If you as board are.
Yeah. Any other questions on the 9 factors? All right, then moving on to 4E, we're gonna skip 4E because you're gonna address that topic during your GM report,
Yes.
correct? So we will skip over 4E. That will be addressed in the GM report, the compliance report. So then we'll move on to item F of the regular agenda, item 4F, discussion, consideration of, and possible action on a purchase of a well camera. Mr. Todd.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. What we have is an offer from Post Oak to purchase their recently refurbished well camera that they use. The camera is 500-foot cable, 2 different cameras. We've used it on a few wells here in the Lost Pines district. The current retail, I believe, for that model with the options that they're looking at is around 16 to 17,000. So we're looking at about a 25% savings by buying it from Post Oak. At this point in time, I know Fayette County has a camera that by policy is not allowed to leave the Fayette County Groundwater District. So far, we've been lucky to be able to use Post Oak's camera on occasion as we needed to. There's also the Texas Well Owners Network that has a camera that can be loaned out, but there you're competing against every other district within the state. So it's kind of a tight window to be able to get that one. So we had previously discussed purchasing our own camera, especially with part of the mitigation program to do screened intervals and find some information about downhole information about wells within the district. So I realize $12,000 is a fairly significant investment, but I think that it's going to be well worth our time. This whole unit can be thrown in the back of a car, set up over a well. The only real hassle to it is, connecting to the car battery to drive the unit up to the wall. But other than that, the times that I've worked with them on it, it's been a very handy unit. I don't know. I can't speak to the refurbishment. That's the only thing I can't guarantee. But
Why are they selling it?
they are actually looking to buy, I think, 3,000-foot long camera. 3,000, maybe 1,500 foot. It's significantly larger than the one that they're selling. So that's the motivation for selling this one. Yes, sir.
Is this coming with a warranty?
Not to my knowledge, but I did not ask. That's a good question. I never asked if they had a warranty after refurbishment.
Because that's the advantage of buying a new well camera is you got
A warranty. Yeah.
You have a warranty till you get out of the parking lot.
Well, if
So
that's such as a new one,
I believe it's around 16,000 with all the options they're including.
then how long would they normally last?
There's not really a failure point on there aside from,
Like forever, maybe?
I wouldn't say forever. I mean, but if I recall correctly, Post Oak has had this one for at least 6 years before they refurbished it.
it's that old and they're only going to give us a 25% discount.
We could go back and renegotiate, I
So,
suppose.
what do
Don't-
you?
Yeah,
don't you
get a
think-
new one. buy
don't
a
you
new
think-
one.
But for that it's a used one and it's been offered to you, would you be looking to buy one right now? How often do you use one?
So part of the mitigation program that requires diagnostics to qualify for wells that, are being mitigated post January of this year. Part of that mitigation or part of those diagnostics is having cameras to look at the screen intervals and everything else. So right now we're reliant on borrowing a camera from somewhere else to be able to complete
It'd
those.
be a real time saver.
I think ideally we'll never have to mitigate another one. Realistically, we probably will. So having a camera on hand, is it going to be something we use every day? Probably not, but I would say 2 to 3 times a month.
That's not part of the work that we've farmed out to LRE.
No, ma'am.
Don't you think we ought to, if we're gonna buy a camera, we ought to buy one that goes a lot deeper?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think
16,000 is not that much when you're talking about
No,
this
ma'am.
type of equipment. That's fine. I think if you want to get one, you should bring us some.
There's not that much difference between the new and the used one.
Yeah.
Sounds like we want to buy something new potentially so we can have a warranty.
And then-
So what best we could do is just table this issue for now.
Mhm.
Have you go off and get some other quotes
we'll bring it back to the infrastructure committee.
and get some quotes for new and maybe you can try to renegotiate the price and learn if there's a warranty.
Previously, when I looked at these, there is a wide range of everything from you connect a hand drill to it and use a hand drill to run the camera down and bring the camera back. There's a lot of options. And so this was a simple option. It came up, and so I thought this might be something to consider. But having heard from the board tonight, some of the things y'all are saying, I think, well, you know, okay, we'll skip over the hand drills and the ones that are manually cranked and start looking at something a little bit longer, maybe a little bit bigger. I think 500 is kind of the sweet spot for us in terms of the wells we have previously mitigated, but you know, there aren't a whole lot of 800 or 900 foot deep domestic wells. Most of them are in that 500 to 600 foot range. But now I've got an idea of what y'all are thinking. I can develop some options. So.
And you can go back to Post Oak and see if they have a warranty and see if they'll accept the.
They want to give it to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Otherwise, what are they gonna do?
No.
They may have limited
Yeah.
buyers, so. Maybe not, so.
Yeah, the warranty question did not occur to me.
Yeah, that's a good
I'll
question, yeah.
definitely send that one back to Mr.
Okay.
Curry.
Tell them we'll take it off their hands.
I've already tried that.
Okay, so we'll just table this for now, and then you'll come back to the infrastructure committee with more,
It may be August time frame.
yeah, okay.
We do that.
That's reasonable.
One of the post office directors contacted me about going in together, finance and accounting. I don't know what the rest of his directors say, but that was the guy that was over here.
Is that right? Jeffrey Skyby.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that might be an option for Jim to explore, if maybe we can go and share the costs and share costs.
Depends on how often it has to be
Yeah.
used.
Yeah.
Depends on where it's gonna live.
Yeah, that's close to me. We can keep the reel, they can keep the cameras.
There you go.
All right, any other discussion on this item? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to regular agenda item 4G, the committee report with possible board discussion. No action will be taken. Financial Services Committee did not meet this month. The Governance Committee did meet. We met at 9 a.m. on June 5th via Zoom. In attendance were myself, Director Rogers and Simang, Natasha Martin, Bobby Salehi, and James Totten. We basically planned for the June and July board meetings. We discussed the audio video training. On June 6th, there was training of the entire staff. Mr. Totten and I attended as well, where we received training on the new audio video equipment. We had 2 test committee runs where we tested the Zoom at various committees. The Management Committee, Governance Committee comes to mind. So it was tested, and today everything seems to be working. So happy for that. So we do have a Rambo materials permit planned for July. The newspaper notice went out on the 17th. That'll be planned for July 17th at our July board meeting. That will be that hearing. We discussed along the lines of there's a new social media policy that was brought to our attention by Greg Ellis that we will have to adopt at some point. I believe, according to Greg, there were still some items that that needed to be addressed, and so it was unclear. I think it was the media policy was ready for some entities, but for the groundwater districts, there was still some items left over. But we will have Greg here next month. So Greg is planned and scheduled for the July board meeting.
So is that about TikTok? Yes.
Yes, that's the TikTok bill, where the district computers are not allowed to have certain applications, TikTok being one of them. And so Greg will be here to update us on that. And also, please, if you've got items for the next legislative period for Greg, please come prepared and be ready to give Greg Ellis your priorities for the next legislative session. So I'll be for July. We discussed putting the Post Oak Savannah well camera on this agenda. And we discussed the GMA 12 and the Brazos Valley modeling that was presented at the last GMA 12 meeting in May. And we requested Dr. Hutchinson to analyze the predicted impacts specifically to the Lost Pines district from those recent Brazos Valley permits. And we'll discuss those more, I believe, in the GM report. So that was it.
Starting to wonder why I do a GM report. I mean, by the time we get through the committee reports,
No, there's still more detail there from that one. So you're not off the hook, sorry. All right, next up, infrastructure. I'm not sure if the infrastructure team met.
No, we have not met, this past month. We have received one bid for exterior painting. I think the committee thought it was a little too expensive. And, we'd like to get some more bids on that. Dana is working with someone on signage, sign company out of Bastrop. I don't know if you have any other updates, do you, Jim?
we have an estimate for a table for the board, but based on the feedback we had after the first meeting, it seemed like it wasn't a priority for the majority of you. So, yes, ma'am.
I don't want to sit here again and have to look at these screens. So, I mean, when you get the table, are you going to move the screens, or are we going to have two tables
No,
like
it was
that?
just gonna be like this. No,
Okay.
I'll just ask for a transfer.
Okay, yeah. We'll start putting all the plates up here, and y'all can just see yourself. So,
There's definitely room for,
I mean,
It's just really,
to improve.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll improve. I mean, as we, test it out and find out what needs to be changed, we'll make appropriate
So
changes.
I don't know if that one would be easier for you to see if it was rotated 45 degrees. So you're down.
yeah.
Okay, which was the original idea. And then we kind of thought maybe y'all could use just those two. So we'll try next time to rotate that one out. Okay. But yeah, aside from the painting and the estimates on, a non-plastic table for you, that's all I've got right at this point.
Right, Education Outreach Committee, we already discussed our new position with Claire Marks. Was there anything else?
No, that we actually did interviews last month, and had two very candidates, and decided to make the offer to Claire. And so far, Claire is just a dynamo. She's just incredible. I'm very pleased, and I think we're very lucky to have her. And I don't know if we need to have education, but I guess we still do, because Claire may not be able to come to some of the meetings, and the education committee will still be meeting with her monthly, as long as we need to.
Management Committee.
Management Committee met on June 10th at 9 a.m. at the Giddings office, and via Zoom. The attendants were Cheryl Smith, Herb Cook, Elvis Hernandez, Kay Rodriguez, and Natasha Martin, and Bobby Hill. The committee discussed the following: new groundwater management zone rules. The next GMZ rules will be made available for public comment and reviewed by the board. Expanding the mitigation program to include all aquifer formations. The GMA 12 and alternate DFC methods as presented last year by Dr. Hutchinson. New metering rules and possible grants for purchase of meters. The need to baseline the water quality for the DFC monitoring. That's it.
All right, next up, General Manager's Report.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. The General Manager's Report for June 19th of 2024. During the reporting period from May 1st through May 31st, we had 14 new wells that were drilled within the district and one pre-existing well that was registered with the district. No water quality tests were performed. The Aqua Lab has been closed for renovations. Cut us down to really just the lab at A&M. So we hadn't run any water tests during that period. However, 8 water wells were engaged. During the May period, Lee County experienced its 32nd wettest May in the last 130 years, while Bastrop County experienced its 52nd wettest May in the same time period. The end result is that neither county is currently experiencing drought conditions. We've been kind of yo-yoing back and forth between some of the driest months we've ever seen and some of the wettest months we've ever seen. But for right now, we're doing a pretty good job of keeping drought at bay. For both counties, it has been the 17th and the 28th wettest year on record for Lee and Bastrop counties in the last 130 years. So even though we've had a few dry months in the past, 6 months, it's definitely been a blessing to us. So GMA 12 did meet on May 23rd at the Post Oak Savannah offices in Milano. Part of the meeting included presentations from different districts. One of the figures from that presentation, I believe, was included in your packet, which is it's modeling. It's a summary of modeling from Post Oak Savannah. I'm sorry, from Brazos Valley GCD. Last summer, Brazos Valley GCD went on a bit of a spree and wrote almost 200,000 acre feet of Simsboro permits and conducted public hearings on those. As of this year, as of actually yesterday, they were conducting hearings on transport permits for, I believe, about 60,000 acre feet of the 200,000 permit.
60,000, you said?
I'm
50 something.
100,000.
Oh, was it 100 something? Okay.
Are they managing to depletion like the Ogallala?
That is an open question. We have asked Bill Hudson to take a look at the pumping files that were generated by Brazos Valley. Everything that we currently have available in terms of their predicted impacts cuts off just at the county line for Lee County. So we've asked Bill to rerun the model and specifically evaluate what that increased pumping would mean for our district. Hopefully we'll have something from him in the next month or so. It really depends on his availability to run those models for us, but it should be a pretty straightforward task. There was a hearing yesterday on the transport permits. I went through Monday and looked through their available documents. I know that Texas A&M had filed a contested case request and a SOA request on the permits. I believe the city of Bryan did as well. Whether those were timely filed or not, I don't know. So I haven't had a chance to catch up with Alan and see what that means. But it looks like the transport permits are at least being contested up in the Brazos Valley. So we will keep you all apprised of how that develops over time. In the meantime, like I said, Bill is going to evaluate what that additional permitting and production in Brazos Valley would mean for us.
What is this? This is not Hutchison's.
No,
Where did this come from?
that's Brazos Valley. That's from their hydrologist AGS. So on the dais, it's the actual presentation that was given to the GMA 12. It was 3 pages.
And you notice it cuts off right at the northern end.
One actually shows the drawdown maps, and it cuts off just about northern Lee County. Yeah, on page 2. I was concerned when I saw this, and I was at the GMA 12 remotely, and I was concerned about the Simsboro DFC drawdown because just 2 years ago, Brazos Valley and the GMA 12 adopted the existing DFCs, and their DFC is 262 for the Simsboro, and that was in the year 2070. So they had just 2 years ago in August, less than 2 years ago, August of 22, Brazos Valley adopted 262 as their 2070 DFC. And now if you take a look at that graph, you see that they're going to hit that just 5.5 years from now, 6 years from now. So that 2070 date is now looking like 2030, 40 years earlier than planned. So it's not just a simple, like a little off. They're like, way, that's a concern. That's quite a bit, changing the DFCs in 2070 and now hitting it at 2030. The other concern is just the sheer drastic drop, the quickness, just within a couple of years between 2028 and 2031, the bottom just falls out. It's just an exponential decay of the drawdown, exponential drawdown almost. It's just not going to give them a lot of time to implement rules or curtail. I guess they're plan across the board curtailment. Good luck with that. But it's just such a drastic change that it was very concerning, and that's why I wanted to bring it up here today and inform everyone, because it is a big deviation from what was just adopted just 2 years ago.
So what can we do? Just at the GMA 12 process meetings, try to get 3 votes on our behalf instead of Brazos Valley getting all the water?
Yeah, I guess it'll certainly this issue will bubble up 2.5 years from now at the GMA 12 when the vote comes up for a vote on the new DFCs. I know that Post Oak Savannah just last week at their board meeting, they voted to evaluate the DFCs using the existing DFCs and not increasing them. So, yeah, there might be, some conflict in the next couple of
We
years.
also have a committee.
Also on the DFC.
So I just wanted to highlight this very, we can't, obviously we can't, we don't want to tell them how to run their district, but, I said, but certainly it's concerning. We need to keep an eye on it. And really, the GMA 12 process is our avenue to.
Yeah, but us, they have, all their committee meetings are open to the public, still that way. So we could go to the DFC meeting, committee
For
meeting.
post, yeah, Post-Oak is probably going to bear, it looks like they're going to bear the brunt
Yeah. I think so,
of the
yeah.
impacts. But Dr. Hutchinson will evaluate the impacts for our district.
Yeah, Brazos Valley also has it.
So is the 200,000, is that coming from requests for what? 1 or 2 or 3
15,
clients?
they had 15 over the course of July through September of 23. So over the course of just 3 months last year, July through September of last year, they permitted 192,000 acre feet from the Simsboro to 15 different applicants. They had one board meeting where they granted permits to 10 applicants, close to 92,000 acre feet in one hearing, in one afternoon. They granted 10 permits over 90,000 acre feet, in just one hearing.
And they were able to justify that according to their rules.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, because and Mr. Day has stated several times at the GMA 12 that their philosophy is that they're going to give out all the permits until they hit the DFC. That they will give out all permits. And at the same time, they will proactively mitigate every single Simsboro well. So they're going out and contacting every Simsboro well owner, and they will proactively drill a new well if needed, or lower their pumps, whatever is needed, so that the well owners are happy and the applicants are happy.
Over 500 wells.
What
Well,
is that
we'll call it-
rationale?
That's their philosophy. That's-
Obviously,
But,
Brian.
there, again, it looks great until the year 2030 hits, right? When the year 2030 hits, then that's when they're going to have to.
Mr. Allen Day will be retired.
So that's when
I'm
things
serious.
are going to be interesting.
Is this somebody?
No, it's just
Just give it a-
yeah, it's just a lot of permits came in at the this last year.
As I recall, they had a set of rule changes that were on the books similar to what we did 2 years ago, except they did not go into a moratorium prior to making those rule changes. So they got hit with the land rush as soon as the rule changes were published. So a lot of these permits were people that may not have ever applied had the rules remained as they were, but when they saw that the rules were changing, that were going to possibly limit production, it triggered a lot of these 15 applicants to come in looking for water. So just from a context standpoint, that's kind of what drove it. It was people trying to get that changes in the Brazos Valley rules.
The land, water, yeah.
Water rush, I would say.
Water.
And to that point, I'll kind of skip ahead on my report and then come back. So as far as upcoming meetings, the Post Oak Savannah Groundwater Conservation District Groundwater Summit will be July 18th at the Caldwell Civic Center. And one of the panels at that summit will be myself, Alan Day, Gary Westbrook, and I believe Billy Howe from Texas Farm Commission. No, Texas Farm Bureau. Farm Bureau, yeah. So I think that I don't have the schedule in front of me. I believe that's the first or second presentation on the 18th, so 9 or 10 o'clock, I believe. But that will be the day after our next board meeting, so I will remind you at our next board meeting and give you the specifics of it, just in case you feel like wasting a day in Caldwell. Circling back, the district has processed a total of 15 mitigation applications since the first. If you may recall, the last meeting I said I expect us to be just over $100,000, and we are currently at $106,736.54. So relatively close to our estimates for the year. The average cost of mitigation is standing at about $5,345. If you factor in the cost of replacement wells that average cost jumps up to $7,049 per well. We currently do not have any pending applications, so we have a few people that have applied but have not started the process of diagnostics and things like that. But we don't have any pending in terms of actual cost or any of the that have made it through the process and are pending for payment. So at this point in time, we're kind of halfway through the year. We're looking at about just over $100,000 on mitigation. Previously, I believe we discussed up to a possibility of 400,000. So I think we're on a pretty good footing for that. There is a copy of petition. Speaking of DFCs and petitions, GMA 14 received a petition regarding the feasibility of their DFCs. GMA 14 is in the Houston area. Specifically, this is targeted at Lone Star Groundwater Conservation District. This particular petition has nothing to do with us. It requires no action on our part, but it came in, and so I supplied a copy of it to you as part of this report, just for your own information to see what was going on in that other GCD and what angles people are taking with GMA petitions. So that is there. If you have questions, feel free to give me a call and we can talk through it. We introduced clear marks. I had planned on bringing you drafts of the compliance report today. I ended up spending most of last evening at the hospital with Jane, so I did not get that report done. I will get it out to you by the end of the week. The intent was to give you a draft and let you take it home, make comments, supply comments and all that. So whether it was tonight or Friday or it was really more about getting it, the first draft of distributed for comments back from you all. So I'll be a few days behind on that. I apologize for that, but I couldn't plan for how this week has turned out. But with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Jim? Thank you, Jim. We'll just schedule the compliance report for next month.
My plan was to give you all the draft and then we could do an approval next month. So we're still on schedule for that in just a couple of days.
All right, so that's that was item 4H, general manager's report. So now we're at 4I, consideration of future agenda items. We've got next month, I've got LRE Water. I confirmed this with Vince. Next month, he's going to give a presentation on the final task deliverable, the groundwater surface water interaction. Right, Vince, still on track for that?
Dr. Fernandez giving that presentation.
Dr. Fernandez. Okay.
Is he coming here?
Yes.
Yes.
So Sammy, you could comment with the.
I'm not sure. I hadn't touched base with Vince on that one, but we will afterwards. We've also got Greg Ellis for July, Jim's compliance report, and we have the Rambo materials hearing for July. Anything else for future agenda items?
I wasn't here last month, but I see we're still meeting at 6. I guess we're not going to have our meeting. I'm sorry about
At this,
that.
yeah, at this point, we couldn't agree on a 4:30.
It's just, now we get to drive
Yep.
home in the dark.
Yeah, well,
Well, it's flooding too.
Yeah. Exactly.
We may have to go.
I've tried twice.
Well, you all
I've
get
tried
us
twice.
safe.
Hey, we could put constant hallway if you like.
Thank you. You got comments?
All right, anything else on that? All right, then item J.
President, now that we've tested the system and Bobby, your hearing is fine.
Loud and clear, Jim.
Now that we've tested the system, I think let's circle back to Kate's request for the expert from the Springs project.
Texas Water Development Board Springs Initiative.
I was going to say authority. I knew that wasn't right. Springs
Yeah,
Initiative.
please reach out to Cody.
So,
his-
yeah,
his name.
let's try to get that on.
It relates to one of the DFC things we're talking about.
Yeah, the surface water, groundwater.
That's
interaction.
exactly right. Okay, great.
All right, yep, so yeah, that's been on our list for future agenda items. We were just waiting on getting the Zoom. Okay, item 4J, discussion, consideration, possible action on board meeting calendar. I don't think there's any changes on that. Just a reminder that we did move the August meeting of a week earlier.
Well, and we missed it. Today was a federal holiday. So
Yeah, today, yeah, we missed today's date, so apologize for that. Won't happen again.
So our
August
meeting
is
will
getting-
be July 17th.
Yeah, the next meeting, you're at the next item K. 4K, set date and location of next meeting is July 17th, 6 PM here at the Giddings office. Well, it should be 6. We'll confirm the time, but it's certainly July 17th here at the Giddings office. It is 6 PM because we have the Rambo hearing at 6. That's a done deal. Yeah, that's set.
Can
So-
board members attend by Zoom?
Yes.
That's
Yeah, as long as we have
the
6,
majority.
yeah, as long as we have 6, a quorum here, at the Giddings office.
Plus you have to be able to be seen on the screen.
Yeah, and then you have to have your video on, but yeah, we can now have, directors attend via Zoom. As long as we have 6 directors here, in the office.
mute yourself so we can't hear the cast.
I'll just fish out of the car.
Okay, so the next, date and location is July 17th here at the Giddings office, and it is at 6 PM because the Rambo hearing has already been noticed, and that is starting at 6 for the Rambo hearing, Rambo materials hearing. All right, with that, thank you, everyone. We will adjourn tonight's meeting at 8:12 PM.